Awesome. What's good, everybody? Welcome to week 3. We're going to be halfway done here. This week we're going to go over logistics. I'm going to share my screen real quick. We changed up we flipped the last 2 weeks, I think, here too. Let me make this full screen for you. This was last week's here. Last week we did budgeting a tour. Jordan, I think, is going to send the YouTube links for the first 2 sessions to everybody. And
You want to drop them in the chat though right now? We can just do that.
cool. Yeah, and then we'll email them out too. Next week we'll have this one in there too, so anyone can go back and watch them if you want to. Last week we did budgeting a tour. That one's going to be on YouTube here shortly for whoever wants to watch it. We made a little flip on the last 2. Initially, we were doing Run a Show last on June 7th and session number 6. We're going to just flip it. It just makes more sense from like a rhythm and flow standpoint to change those. We got everybody back here again this week. This week, we're going to go over logistics, covering just really what logistics are internationally as well. The main points of logistics being flights, cars, hotels, and buses. Everyone's going to kind of take their own and explain them out to you. This week's going to be a little different. We're going to do a Q&A after every subject rather than just at the end. So feel free to just send over questions as we're talking about whatever logistical standpoint we're going over. So, if you have flight questions when we're talking about those, just send over flight questions, and then we'll start to talk about it. And then we will go over customs and carnets, and that should be it. This one should be pretty interesting. First things first, I guess we could just jump right into it. We're going to start with just what are logistics. Logistics are the moving parts of touring, how you get from point A to point B essentially in a timely manner. Who else wants to just talk about general logistical? I mean, that pretty much covers what it is, right? Anyone want to jump in there before we get into flights?
I mean, it's just about getting from point A to point B and how everything kind of coincides, comes together so that your timings work out with one another, and that, it's a lot of just doing and work in advance before you can get on the road, and then making sure everything goes smooth out there. And it's kind of like how everything moves along the road. And it's really situational based, which is why we're going to have questions after everything. So kind of like, if there's a certain situation you have in mind where you're like, hey, say this happens and this happens, how would you handle this? Like, those are the things that kind of can help drive this conversation as well.
Agreed. Yeah. Logistics are pretty much like, as a tour manager, is definitely one of the things you battle the most and should be one of your higher skill sets to be a good tour manager for sure. Jumping right into it, we will cover flights as the first portion. Levi, I know you're driving, but if you want to just start touching on flights, we can just help you out and kind of jump in where we want to as well. I think you're muted too if you want to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
Yep, there you go.
Yeah, flights are very, very, very important. Flights can also make or break a show because there's a lot of moving parts, of course, which things you got to be on top of. But first and foremost, when it comes to flights, where I personally like to start is, of course, seeing, like, if it's going to be a festival run, again, back to that, or a headline run, is seeing what your set times are, and also knowing your load-in schedule and your changeover, all that good stuff. Because there's been quite a few different things, like, for example, if you're on a festival run and you have to go from one show to the next, you're flying the day of shows versus flying in the day before, which affects that. So when you start booking flights and looking at flights, again, that's A, what you want to know. B is when you start laying them out to you free visually. So what you kind of want to do is have a template that you like to build out your team names, arrival, departure times, the locations, all this good stuff, which I'm sure we have a template someone could show, or we could show at the end of this. But that's where I usually like to start. Also looking into, when it comes to logistics, is knowing if it's a part of the deal or not. Sometimes buyers, promoters will be able to give you a buyout for your flights, which covers your transportation costs, which is really nice to know. And also balancing the cost. If it's going to be an artist cost, you want to know, of course, what the efficiency is with your cost. For example, if you have to fly in a day before a show, it's going to cost more to have a direct flight, but it's going to reduce your risk factors. If you have a layover, you're just adding in a whole nother thing that could go wrong to miss that day of show flight. However, if you have a travel day, you of course want to pick the cheaper flight because it's a whole day of travel, so you don't really care. You just want to make sure you get the team there so you can do a layover. That's kind of when it comes to efficiency. Private jets, this is something that kind of comes more into play, of course, when you have a higher budget. And that's a whole another thing, but it keeps everything moving very smoothly. It's much easier to deal with. You're dealing with tail members. You can get onto the actual tarmac with your vehicles, making sure the artist is out of the public eye as much as possible. International flights. This is something, when it comes back to cost versus efficiency, international flights is kind of a bitch because you're moving everyone from A to B, maybe from the US or from one other country to the next. You really, you don't want to cheap it out here because it's going to be such long haul flights, from a flight from Joburg to Atlanta or vice versa. You're looking at a 16-hour flight. So, you don't want to piss off your team, especially artists, with putting them in a middle seat economy coach. You want to talk to the management, let them know the scenario. And that's something to really have a conversation with about, and making sure you give those people extra leg room on their flights when you're purchasing seats. And also, if you have a team flying together out of rehearsals or not, what I usually like to do is, fly from the same location, of course. But if we're not doing rehearsals, what I like to do is fly everyone in from their home base to a international outbound airport, which could be a JFK or Los Angeles. Then we take that outbound flight together. But again, with cost, if that's not something you can do, add in that extra leg. Just try to get yourself to the international location before your main primary artist arrives or any of your team members, just so you're on the ground first. Start taking care of whatever you need to. Let's see, direct layovers, I kind of touched on that with having direct flights versus layovers. Again, it kind of comes down to the cost efficiency of travel days versus day of show flights. Business class, first class is, this is something that's really important for long hauls. One of my artists, he wants first business class on flights, anything over 4 hours. That's just his go-to. And you, as a tour manager, you can try to wiggle your way in. Up there, budget, of course, is there for long hauls, because once you're sitting on an 8-hour flight over that, it sucks sitting upright for that long. Something for food for thought. Hiring greeters at airports. So again, when it comes to logistics of flying, the thing that will literally save your stress levels in your life is being able to hire VIP meet and greets or porters and greeters at airports, which means, sometimes when you show up to an airport and you let the porter know you're maybe 10 minutes out, you show up with your A party, all that you have to do is stay in the car, pop open the trunk, they'll tag your bags for you, they have your boarding passes ready, and then you hop out, go straight to a lounge. Again, this costs money, but it saves you time and stress, and also keeps the artist out of the public eye. As well as for doing layovers, if you're doing international flights and you have to go through immigration again, having a meet and greet saves you immense amount of time from getting from one country into the other when you have to recheck your passports, because you have to make that next flight, and you're not taking your whole team of 12 or 15 people into the regular line where you have to wait behind maybe 2 hours of Something to do as well is once you start flying around with a team, even yourself, if you don't have this set up, is make sure you have all your frequent flyers set up, which means, from JetBlue to Southwest, but for the majors is American Airlines, Delta, and United, because they have alliances internationally all over the world, from flights in Asia and Australia and Europe to the United States. That's something very important. You also will keep those numbers part of your initial advance template that you hand over to your travel agent. So when they start booking you flights, they know what numbers are tagged to what person, and that's not something you really have to worry about. Just make sure you get all those from your team. And when it comes to baggage, again, when you're booking flights, one of the big things to help save on money or reduce costs is getting a bag count ahead of time, which means personal luggage as well as equipment. Because if you don't have the capability to actually hire greeters and porters at airports or meet and greets, all that good stuff, if you have to go to a regular economy check-in, you got a line of 10 people behind you, you guys all have your own carts of baggage and gear. The check-in process, A, is going to take a long time, but B, is going to cost a lot. And having those bags prepaid ahead of time will save you a shit ton of time and money, because they usually charge more at airports. And yeah, I think if there's nothing else I touched on, guys, go ahead.
Anyone from our team want to jump in before we?
I'll show quickly like one of the grids that he was talking about of what we would send over to a travel agent. Just in a quick example, it's a really simple grid just for like a one-off. It just shows. I'll show it to you. Hang on one sec here. Great. So this is just a simple grid. It just breaks down who you have flying, first and last names. You want to make sure you have like the full legal name here that's correct, that got to go on their boarding pass, and if it's wrong, they'll have issues at the airport, and that'll be a big problem. So, and if you're not sure if it's someone's nickname or real name, just make sure you ask. And I always like to send out a grid, like a form in advance of my crew, just get all their information as far as their frequent flyer numbers, their full legal name, their birthday, all that stuff, just so you have it at your fingertips whenever you need it, and you don't need to ask them for it later. And then we also have, departure dates, the route. I just make it really simple, just out city to city. You don't really need to go into it too deep there. And then your return date and the route, same thing for each person, because sometimes it's going to change person to person, as you can see, based on where their home city is. And then I just put notes here, like for the principal, first class, and then just kind of what flights I'm looking at, whether or not I want a red eye, whether or not if I don't want a red eye, anything I don't want there. And usually your travel agents will be able to just take a look at that and understand what you want and send you options back. And that makes it really simple for you. You can just highlight the options you want in the email, and then everything's good to go. The hotel grid down here went for a quick one-off like this too, because it's just one city, one night, so it's just easy to keep it all in one place. It's the same person who's booking everything. So you just have your number of rooms, the people's names, and any notes there. So like something that's important, Manny's going to touch on hotels, but for the principal, you want to have a suite for them, and then any other rooms that you want to make sure are close to that person as well. A lot of times you're going to want to have your security near the principal and things like that, or their assistant. So that's a simple grid that we would use. One thing I'll mention as well, hang on, I got to figure out how to stop sharing my screen now. There we go. So one thing that's important to mention as well is red eyes, and we didn't really touch on that yet, but so red eyes are you get those going from West Coast to East Coast a lot of times, and those are that's correct. So those will be overnight flights. Like when you're going LA to New York, you can take a flight at 1 o'clock in the morning or 12 or 11. Fly overnight, land at between 5 and 8 in the morning on the other side of the country. And some artists like that, and some artists hate that. So it's an important thing conversation to have going into your experience with the artist, because if they have a show day, some of them are not going to want to fly in, land at 8 in the morning, and then have to go to sound check at noon. Some just aren't going to care, and they want as much time at home as possible. So that'll vary artist to artist. Always ask, always get options, and know what your options are. If the artist is like, no, I don't want that, I want something around here, okay, cool, we'll have this option as well. Always have an A, B, and a C plan for everything, especially with logistics. Never assume everything's going to go correctly. I always like to check and see what flights are after the flights that we're taking in case somebody misses a flight or anything like that. Just be prepared for anything really. And then if anybody else wants to jump in on that.
I forgot one more thing I wanted to mention, especially when you're flying as groups outside of the U.S. There's absolutely no reason to miss a flight if it's in your control to get there well beforehand. For example, any flight we had on an Asia tour, I was there no later than 3 hours, and sometimes we used all the way up to getting there just on time at the gate before they closed it.
Pretty wild.
Yeah, and but again, some of the things you can cut back on that is if you have the capability to purchase lounge access for your team and these greeters, you can cut back on that amount of time you have. But for budgets that you can't, as a tour manager, you got to make sure that your team is there on lobby call, transportation's ready to rock and roll, and you guys get there well beforehand, because again, you might be sitting in an economy check-in line for a long ass time and dealing with bags and security and immigration. So if you happen to be out on a Waste Potential tour, if I hear that you guys missed flights this entire group or that, you will be hearing from me personally.
Yeah, definitely. I guess we can just start getting into some of these questions.
One other thing I wanted to get into, one thing real quick. It is important, obviously, to be there super early. And the only person, if anybody does miss flights on your team, that cost is not on the artist, by the way. That's like something really important to mention. That cost is on the person who missed the flight. I've had situations where, we've sent a band out to Europe and they've gone to go to the airport and missed their flight to Europe to start the tour. And it's like, all right, well, we're not going to cover the costs for another flight for you that we just paid the $1,000 to get you out there last minute. So that's on them. And the only person, who really has an excuse to miss a flight is the artist. And, at that point you deal with it. And the only reason you should miss a flight is just because if you're with that artist and it's their fault. But you need to do everything. And, whether it's lying to them about what time the flight is, or whether it's pushing the cars earlier and having a buffer in there, whatever it is, that's kind of on you to work with the personality of the artist and make sure that, you finesse them into being there on time.
Yep. Yeah, sometimes you got to tell them lobby calls earlier than it actually is, or whatever. I know that's a trick Cotton used to use, which is a lot, Justin and Cotton.
Oh, and print out your artist boarding pass in advance. Like, go on, check them in, pay for their bags, text them their boarding pass, so all they have to do is walk through security.
Yep. Niku, feel free to mute yourself. I saw you had a question about upgrading flights. Interesting question.
Yeah, what's up, guys? I just real fun when it comes to, you're upgraded, but your artist doesn't. Do you give them the seat? Because they're paying for your flights. I do. I've done it multiple times with my artists. I don't know if it's. I just wanted your guys' opinion on it because I feel bad if I don't. But yeah.
Justin, feel free to take it.
I worked hard for that upgrade. I'm just kidding. So I've had this scenario when I travel with women, my female artists, I always offer them my upgrade. That's the gentleman in me. For the guys, it kind of depends. I'll still say hey, I got upgraded. And I'll be like, yo, you want this? And a lot of times they'll turn it down. And then sometimes, depending on the flight, I'll just be like, yo, your seat is 3A. What's your seat? I'm taking your seat. Your seat is 3A. Just because I don't want them to have to deal with having to accept it from me. Because for men, a lot of times it's like, I don't want to accept this. Now, a trick to it is also when I'm booking flights for an artist that doesn't typically travel in first class, I group our reservations on the same record locator number, because if I have a better status than they do, I'm going to get the upgrade before they would. But if I put us together, they get my status. So in that situation, if there's 2 seats, we both get upgraded. If there's only 1 seat, then I'm going to get the upgrade, but I'll still, like I said, for the most part, offer it to them. It's a nice gesture, but man, listen, you fly a whole lot of miles to get them upgrades. So
well, my rule of thumb was my rule of thumb was if it's an international flight and it's like 12 hours, like I get the upgrade, I don't know, like I feel bad, but like I'm kind of gonna take that seat. But if it's a short 2 hour flight, 3 hour flight, I'll give. I mean, I always offer it, and he always takes it. So, and, I don't know. I feel bad. I feel bad in taking it and not at least not offering it. I always offer it. But I just wanted to see your guys' opinion on it. Thank you.
Definitely a nice gesture for sure. For
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, good question. Douglas Torres, you want to unmute yourself?
Hey, no, pretty simple question. I was just curious. Obviously, there's like tons of airlines, and obviously, I don't know if that might maybe change after this situation with what's going on right now with airlines. But I'm curious of just like if you guys have a one go-to airline that you prefer. Obviously, there's tons of options and different reasons why you may go to one airline over another. I'm just curious how you kind of make that decision.
Delta all day.
Delta?
I would say most people would say Delta, but you got some artists depending on where they live, I guess. Most
Yeah.
artists live out of LA. LA's been great for Delta.
No, but I can tell you one thing that you definitely want to check with your airlines before you put your artists on them. There are some first class cabins that do not have monitors and they do not have outlets. And if you put your artist on a cross country flight without monitors and outlets, promise you, you will hear about it from the artist. And if it happens again, you will be in some serious shit. And you can take that from somebody who has done it more than once. And let me tell you that airlines is American Airlines. Those sons of bitches do not put outlets and monitors in 90% of their cross-country cabins. Just so heads up.
Hey, I
And
mean,
and
Oh, go
and
ahead,
I was gonna
Justin.
say to Jordan's point, it's really about knowing your artist, knowing where their base is, because you know, for some people, if they're flying out of Atlanta, they want Delta. If they're flying out of Detroit, they want Delta. But then you have
Chicago's
those that
American. Yeah.
Yeah,
Chicago's
Chicago's American.
American. So, and I bounce between American and Delta. But that's just part of being a tour manager, is knowing that specific artist wants and needs. You know, I have one person that will only fly American Airlines and British Airways, but I have somebody else that will only fly Delta. So it's just knowing. It's great if you can get status on multiple airlines, but it's really about what that artist wants and making sure that their needs are met.
And it's super important to know that like some airlines don't fly certain routes. And so setting expectations with the artist is super important. Like I have an artist who literally only wants to fly Delta. If they see the American Airlines logo, they are fucking
They
pissed.
get skittish now.
And
Yeah.
but when you fly LA to Miami, you can only fly direct if you fly American. And so you have to let the artist know, hey, you're either gonna fly American or you can fly non-direct on Delta. But that's like an option that you need to let them know and like build their expectations so they know what to expect when they get on the flight. And then if they like, yeah, it's cool, let's take the American flight, then no, they know what they're getting. You're not gonna have any problems. So that's what's important. Artists don't like surprises. They don't do well with change at all.
Yep.
Hey, you know something else too to remember with airlines. I had this situation to be clear which airlines have lie flat seating domestically. That's very common going across the water internationally, but American has, and it's not every flight from LA to New York. American has like 2 flights that have lie flat seat. It's like the first flight in the morning and then the red eye at the end of the night. So you have to be clear if your artist wants that to do that. And JetBlue is the other one where I think all of their first class cabin is lie flat, but verify it. You know, have your travel agent verify it, or go on Seat Guru, call the airline, just verify that stuff so that you don't find yourself in a situation like Jordan.
There are so many different cabins too. Like especially when you go international, like you go on to fly to Australia, you're flying in Asia. There are so many different cabins in the plane. It's not just first class, business class, and coach. It's like premium economy, business class. It's all over the place, and all of them have different situations, and so all different price points as well. So having that conversation with your artist is important.
Yep. Very true. Let me
Guys.
see. Couple other actually Sam had a question about more, and that's more on the Carne group. Jess, feel free to unmute yourself. I saw you had a travel agent question.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask because I've seen some artists just have somebody on the team book team flights to save on those fees with the agents. Does this group, is Wasted Potential, do you guys prefer to always use a travel agent for, I guess, cohesive purposes, or will there be a time where, okay, well, it's just 6 of us flying, I can book all these flights on one record?
Oh, first thing that comes to mind is I personally prefer a travel agent. I mean, even regardless if it's one or two people flying. Reason being is because you will always have a 24/7 support line in case anything hits the fan or if you're up in the air. You have someone that you can fall back to and help take care of some stuff. Even if it's not your direct travel agent, part of the company they typically work with will be there to step in and help you out with some big issues. But on the contrary, to save maybe on $50, just go to, if you just need to book a quick flight like kayak or something, done that many times, you just got to just look at the holistic thing going on and seeing like, well, if shit does hit the fan, like, do I really need a fallback right here, or would I be able to take care of this?
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Hey, just to your point too, a lot of times if the artist is just like, I don't want to use a travel agent, and you've explained the importance or the comfort you can have as a tour manager with using a travel agent, if something happens, I use that as a teaching moment. Like, well, look, we're having to do this, we're having to do this. We paid this extra money when we could have called our travel agent and they, fixed it. Because a lot of travel agents get free change fees and different things that we can't get because we don't have that relationship with them.
And a lot of them just have straight bat lines to the airlines. Like, they don't have to sit on the normal like customer service lines. So like, if you say you get in the air and you realize that like there's a bag that didn't make it or something like that, you can hit the travel agent, and like they can work with the airlines to find out where that bag is. And like, if you need to make changes, that you just hit your travel agent, hey, I need to make changes, I need to see options, and it's saving you time from doing that so you can work on other things. But I mean, at the same time, it's totally about budget and what they're gonna let you do there.
Right. I know Delta has the diamond line. If you actually can get the number, like, you're pretty much in the green. But yeah, the travel agent, I agree, it's a much better option to have.
Oh, you get diamond, you're God.
Well, thank you guys.
Yeah, no problem. And I feel like also it's important to all those things we just mentioned, like the manager of the artist is usually going to be the one you have to convince to get a travel agent. Making sure you have these points, whether you just put them in a note when you're going to have this conversation and pitch those things to them, because a lot of times they're just going to be like, oh, you can just do it, and convincing them otherwise. Let's keep it rolling into the next logistical thing that we're going to cover would be cars. Ground transpo. Cotton, we're gonna have you handle this one, so feel free to take the reign.
Cool. What's up, guys? So cars are hard. Not hard, but they can really screw you. Piggyback like what Levi said about set times and stuff. A lot of artists tend to fly day of show and things. So being aware of like how far the airport is, traffic time, rush hour, stuff like that is really important. One of the things you want to look for, I'm gonna share my screen, is you want to look for the nice car, like Escalades, something sexy, right? You don't want nothing like this. Right? You don't want. So when you book cars and stuff, you want to be very cautious of the company, what their status is, what their reputation is, because obviously an artist wants to show up in something nice. That can include like an Escalade, that can include a Maybach, a ton of top of the line cars. But just one of the things to be mindful of is what type of car. I know some people like Escalades as opposed to what's the Ford model, Expeditions. They don't like cars like that, or they don't like Navigators. So just be mindful of that. Also be mindful of the seating. Like Escalade has two different type of seating. It has captain seats where you can fit 3 in the back, 2 in the middle, and then 1 in the passenger seat. Or some Escalades, the basic model has a bench seat in the middle, bench seat in the back, and then 1 passenger. So some you can fit 7, some you can fit just 6. So be mindful of that when you're, booking cars. And then I'm going to pull up a grid, it's kind of similar to a flight grid. Let me move this out the way. I don't want to look at myself. So this one has like the date, it has the time, the pickup time. For airport pickups, the signage that the driver will display on pickup, the airport, and then this is obviously important, the flight number. Typically, if you have a good transportation company, they track the flight. Obviously, flights get delayed. Sometimes they come early, things like that. So providing the flight number is super important. The drop-off location, and then the number of passengers. Now, knowing your group as far as how much luggage they typically fly with is important. For example, a pop artist would typically, what I learned, does not travel as much stuff as a hip hop artist. So being mindful how much luggage your crew has, your artist carries, things like that, is important to know how much space you need to provide so they can get to their destination. Because what you don't want is, especially at the airport, is you get there and then you don't have enough space for luggage, and then you have to call an Uber, you have to call a taxi. It just really makes you look bad and just adds stress to the entire situation. But that's basically, that's the grid is self-explanatory. Contact as far as who is in charge when the driver arrives on site, who they text, who their point of contact is. And I wonder what else sticks out here. Sometimes, like for festival runs, or like just show runs, period, the artists would typically like to keep the same car. It just makes it easier. They don't want to take everything out the car. It's no point to like have a driver drop off and come back. So like when this says vehicle will remain on as directed, that means the vehicle will stay during the duration of the show. So like they picked up at 4:45 and they didn't return until 9:45. But just be mindful in that also when the car sits for that long, you're still paying by the hour. One of the things that obviously a car service is costly. It can cost a lot of money. So one of the things you kind of battle with at the beginning is knowing if your artist can afford a car service or is it worth it, as opposed to just Ubering a black car. So that always depends on the budget that your artist has. I know obviously a smaller budget artist wouldn't have the budget to, get Escalades for every run. They might just have to do an Uber. But just be mindful of the cost, because it can get costly. You might not think about it, but like if you do 2 airport runs, typically that's $300 right there just for an airport drop off and pickup of a SUV. Normally it's like $100 to $120 is the average for airport pickup in most cities. Another thing is just going back to making sure that you smartly, as far as the cars you select, vans for your crew and things like that, because you don't want to get, like, for example, in Europe, a van can only typically fit about 6 to 8 people, while in America, typically a van can fit 10 to 12 sprinters and things like that. They don't really have sprinters over there, so you want to be mindful as far as like 2 Vianos equals 1 sprinter in America. So just stuff like that as you get used to the car types and things, because you don't want to look like this when you show up. As far as when the cars show up, you can't fit 20 people in a small car. So just always be mindful of the type of cars and things like that. And then lastly and not least, to clarify if you have ground transportation part of the deal. This is a sample deal memo. Scroll down, it says obviously ground transportation purchasers to provide and pay for local transportation to and from venue, airport, accommodation per artist specifications. That part is very important. I should have brought it up, but I forgot. But typically, like for this artist, this is Juice WRLD, rest in peace. We actually made a ground transportation rider that we would send out to the purchaser, the promoter who's getting the transportation. Basically, it just says that for a party, I need 3 SUVs, late model, no old, no newer or not older than 2018. And for B and C party, I need a spinner that can fit 12 people. Basically, it's just like any other rider, hospitality, technical rider that I send out. That way the promoter knows this is what I need, this is what I expect, this is what my artists expect, and this is what I need you to provide. And sometimes they would do that, or sometimes like with flights and stuff, they would give you a buyout and then you will book your own cars. I typically, for me as a PM, I like to do buyouts because I like to keep my relationship. Like I have my own relationship with my company as far as who I talk to. I know the drivers, I know what type of cars I can expect. But just also pay attention to the deal memo because a lot of times you don't have to pay for transportation if the deal is written up like that. And that is basically it for cars. I don't have anything else. Unless you guys want to add something.
Awesome.
I think just touching on making like knowing, like as you mentioned, the number of people that are going to be in the car and like how many seats there are, but not necessarily filling all those seats and kind of what parties everyone travels in as far as who's going to travel in those SUVs and like do you need extra space and kind of that kind of stuff is important to consider because people don't want to travel in full SUVs. If it fits 7, you probably want to put 5 in there. That's just important to know how the artist where he likes to sit, he or she likes to sit and all like as well, and who they like to have in the car.
Yep.
And also it's important to know that, like he was talking about budgets of cars, you really do get what you pay for. We realized that. I've definitely realized that over the last like 2 years. We booked a lot of car service with like a couple of different companies, and we've definitely fired companies for exactly like what Cotton was talking about with like them sending old cars. They're literally they give a perfect example. We were sitting in we were in Alabama, I believe, and we were like waiting for our artist, waiting, and then we see this like old car, like Suburban, start pulling up. Like, nah, that can't be him. And sure enough, he gets out of the car. It's like a 67-year-old driver who's like frail and and in like a 95 Suburban, and that was the car they ever booked for us, and they got fired with it.
Also be mindful too of the markets that you're in. Sometimes you have these small cities, and they just won't have the newer Escalade. So just manage your artist expectations when stuff like that happens, because sometimes that it happens. It's out of your control. Sometimes, like for example, in the middle of Arkansas, you might get lucky and like say Tulsa, Oklahoma, which is a major city, quote unquote, it's close enough where you can get a decent car. So that's one of the things you can look for is, okay, what's the closest major city I'm in that I can get a better car. But just be mindful, the markets do affect the type of car you get.
And also when you're booking cars, it's important to know with the airports whether or not you're having them pick you up at baggage claim or they're going to meet you curbside. Because sometimes car service companies won't automatically have the driver meet you at baggage claim unless you tell them. And sometimes, if you have a greeter service, like Levi had mentioned earlier, you can go have a greeter meet you at baggage claim, get all your bags, and coordinate with the driver. So the driver's waiting at the curb as soon as you get out. So it's super smooth, and you can just have your artist go straight to the car. But that's like on a whole other situation. And just familiarizing yourself with the type of cars internationally, because there's so many different types of vehicles. When you go places like Asia and Europe, it's completely different than it is here. And just getting pictures of advancing the vehicles early is important, so you know what you're getting.
I just want to throw in 2 cents real quick. If you don't have transportation part of your deal, and they expect you to take care of it, say you're not going to rent a car if it's just like maybe a one-way trip. Something to use other than Uber that kind of adds a little bit of luxury. There's 2. One of them I like to use in the States. You can jot this one down. It's called Black Lane. It's not going to necessarily break the bank, but it is pretty good. And then overseas, like in Europe territory, it's called Addison Lee. Two, where you can get nice black cars for more expensive than Uber, but it's not going to be a private car company that I know. Jordan has one that he loves to work with, but it's kind of in the middle, but it kind of adds a little bit of taste to it. And you're not gonna. It's something you can go ahead and pre-schedule as well, so you're not sitting there curbside as well.
Awesome. Let's start getting into some of these questions about ground. I think I saw Connor, you asked if we can share these templates. Typically, a lot of the templates we'll share with people that when they get on Wasted Potential gigs, maybe like the ground transpo, if you hit Cotton or something, maybe he'll share it. But like the budget last week, as soon as people get involved, we kind of are totally down to share everything with team. Gianna, you can unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
My question was, is Ubers and Lyfts, are those like to and from bars and whatnot? Like, I don't know, is that considered like a personal expense that the artist covers out of pocket, or is that built into the budget if there's like an after party? I've definitely been with artists before. They're like, hey, we're going to go hit up this bar, all of us as a crew. And I'm like, is that part of the budget? I don't know.
Who wants to take that? Cotton?
Typically, anything that does not involve the artist themselves is a personal expense. So bars and stuff, unless you have an artist that's going to the bar himself, then I guess that can be a business expense. It's kind of a situation like you got to take it one by one as far as if you're writing with the artist, then yeah, but if you're not writing with the artist, I still think it considers a personal expense. I don't really, maybe I'm not the right one to answer. I never really.
I think one of the ways kind of differentiated that is on show days to get people to day rooms if they need to. If there's a lack of showers, you need to call a quick Uber. That is something I consider as an expense. However, on off days, you're not necessarily needing to Uber to and from places from the hotel because you want to get the bus parked there. That is something that is a personal expense. So,
Okay, that makes sense.
Just first thing I popped in my head for that one.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, that's a really tricky one. I can't tell you how many times I've seen people and the reimbursements try and just sneak in these little trips to the bars or to the movie theaters or the mall.
I've had
Drummers do it all the time.
I had a drummer do it 100%.
See?
Literally like 2 months
it's usually
ago.
drummers.
This drummer sent a list of like
And
$800 worth of receipts from like 4 months after they'd been fired. And I would go through and going through the receipts, and I matched up each one of the trips with like, was this a show day? Were we doing whatever? And sure enough, found 2 receipts that weren't anything to do with the show. So just be diligent. Don't let anyone finesse you.
Yeah, it's good to get those receipts from people. Great question though. Let's go to Niku. I saw you had another question in there. Not sure if you can hear us.
Which question are you referring to?
You said what happens when you advance ground.
Yeah, like I don't know, when I toured India or like Asia and stuff, or even domestic shows, you'll like advance ground and they'll like give you the vehicle type, and you're like, okay, great, we have an SUV, and then you land, and they send something that you did not advance. It's like a car, someone's friend or something is picking you up. You're just like, dude, what the hell? How do you deal with that? Like, without like being a dick, obviously you're there on the ground with your artist. It's not what you advanced. It makes you look like you don't know how to do your job because someone else didn't do their job. Like, how do you deal with that shit? It's like, I think it's like one of the most annoying things for me with ground is like, they tell me one thing and then they provide another thing, especially in India. They just say yes to everything. And then you get there and none of it is what you discussed. They just say yes. I don't know why, but yeah, I just love your guys.
I mean, I think that happens. I mean, not getting what you requested happens no matter it's ground, flights, hotels. I mean, that's just something that will happen. I mean, the quickest thing is just to get your artist out of there. As far as if he can't ride in that car, then call a taxi or Uber. I mean, anything would be faster than, obviously calling the company right then and there, because they won't send it that fast. But you get your artists out of there, and then you take it up with the company as far as, you be a dick to them. I'll tell you one thing: do not be a dick to the driver.
Yeah.
I see a lot of, it's not the driver's fault. I see a lot of times that like the TM would go off on the driver like it's their fault.
Yeah, it's always somebody
Don't
else.
do that. But yeah, I mean, just get your artists out of there and take it up with the company. That's when you push for credit and stuff like that towards, your next trip, or if it is the next trip.
Yeah. Okay.
I, I always make sure that my artist hears the conversation when I have the conversation, whether it's with the promoter, with the company, with the travel agent. I don't want them hating me because somebody else messed up. So I always like make sure I don't put them on speakerphone, but I call them like, hey, by the way, just so you know, this is what showed up. And we specifically asked for, my transportation writer said blah, 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 blah. And then I'm like, hang on the phone, like, yeah, that'll teach them. So that my artist knows, like, I did my job. I did it right. Somebody else messed it up.
Cool. Good to know. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Gab Poli, I saw you had a question about smoking fees in
Yeah.
the car.
Hello. So my question was, especially towards one of my last gigs, I had an artist, he didn't frequently smoke, but then all of a sudden, it was on the way to a festival, after a show, after whatever it might be. So I was wondering, do you guys typically advance what those fees could be, knowing that they're somewhere around like $250, $500, depending on the artist?
Well, yes. My smoking, I asked for a smoke-friendly vehicle in my rider at no cost. Typically, they don't. I've never seen a cost for a smoke-friendly vehicle. You just have to request it in advance. But like a ground transportation, you can request anything. You can request a smoke-friendly vehicle, tinted windows. You can pretty much request anything.
Armored trucks.
Obviously, time. Or if you want an armored SUV, they will find you an armored SUV. It's just about time. But typically, if you have a transportation rider, I put smoke-friendly vehicle as far as how many, one or two, in the rider, and then they will, let you know, they can accommodate or not. And then sometimes they say they can't, and you get on site with the driver. Sometimes under the driver discretion, he'll let you, you slide him a 20 or whatever, and he'll roll down the windows and let you do your thing. And then sometimes you don't get that nice driver and the artist who wants to smoke, and then you get a smoking fee.
Yeah.
And we'll touch on smoking fees in the hotel section as well, because that's another.
Mm-hmm.
We had some serious situations with
Yeah,
that.
we'll touch on that. Keeping it moving. Connor, saw you had a question.
Yeah, so my question for you guys is, when you do more of the international work with Asia or other areas where there's not as much English speaking, do you guys hire on a translator for the whole tour, or how do you handle the communication?
It's a great question. And we were just in Asia recently.
Yeah. I'll touch on
Jordan.
it.
Jordan for sure.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, we were
Jordan.
just
I know it's a
in
rough one.
Asia, and I mean, it feels like you're just in Asia, but it was July. That Asia is a fickle bitch. That was it, you don't bring a translator. You can work with the depending on the size of the artist you have. You'll have like somebody from the label that'll be out there like helping you with promo and stuff like that. And they usually have a good sense of like the region, and they can help you a lot with some of like the customs and just like how things work there. We had that for some cities, and that's cool. But a lot of it's really just learning on the fly and just like trying to do your research and your due diligence before, and just like talking to people that have been there. Hey, what can I expect with this? What can I expect with this? If you have the money for it, that's definitely the place to recommend getting greeters. They are super helpful, but they are also like the biggest pain in the ass as well over there, just because again, like you're trying to communicate with somebody who speaks very, very little English, and you have to coordinate a drop off at the airport. Once you connect, I mean, then you get through everything, but it's just a lot of patience. And I would be the first person to admit that I did not have the most patience going over the first time, but you just have to like calm down and let everything take its process and know that it's going to be a little slower, and keep your artist calm, because the artist wants everything to move the same way it does in the US, but they got to understand that, it's not the same thing. when you're waiting at the airport, when you're waiting and checking bags, and you have no idea why it's taking 20 minutes. It's very difficult to find out why it's taking 20 minutes. So you kind of got to sit there and let it take its time and do it. And then, yeah, I mean, it's really just finding out, like, the first day you get there, okay, what are my equivalent to the US? What's my like Walgreens equivalent in Asia? What's my Uber equivalent here? How can I get food delivered? Like, starting to learn all that shit in advance will help you a lot so that you can just be resourceful when your artist needs you.
Yeah. Everybody deals with the translation issue too. I mean, I was out on that same run with Jordan. I was doing lighting and visuals at the time. And we had a show in where were we, Jordan? Was it the Philippines? No. I had to leave and go do the Chance the Rapper show.
Oh my God, when we were in Jakarta,
Indonesia. So I had to leave. I had to go fly from Indonesia to Australia to go.
I've ever seen in my entire life.
Do a Chance the Rapper show, and I spent all day at the sound check trying to explain to the house LD how to run our show, and I had lists and paper and a show file, and it just wasn't happening. So it was a disaster. I left. He ruined the show. I had to go all the way to Australia, do a show that got canceled the day of, and then fly all the way back to China to make sure that everything went well with Bozzy. It was a nightmare, but
that's just going into logistics in general as like a tour manager, having to deal with like Chad. I mean, I was having to get Chad from, like, once Chad goes to Asia, okay, well, or Chad goes to Australia, he wasn't supposed to come back yet, so now you have to change all your visas and all your immigration so Chad can get into a country he was never supposed to go to, and you're changing flights. Like, that's a super good example of how things can go completely crazy very quickly.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Cool. Thank you.
Anyone else want to touch on that? Translation stuff? I mean, it's pretty.
Pay attention.
Yeah, it's tough. For sure.
Google Translator will save your life if you don't have a translator.
We've definitely done some situations where you just type it in on Google Translate and press play and hold it by the driver, and that way they can hear it, and they usually understand what you're saying, and they'll give you a little smirk and they'll help you out.
Yeah, it's not always perfect though, but yeah, it gets the job done hopefully most of the time. Let's keep rolling. Camilla mentioned, how do we think on our feet on the road in those scenarios? It's tough. You got to lean on your rest of your team for sure, which is why it's nice to have a big team of everyone that has experience. We've all been all around the world, and we've all fucked up and had to learn things the hard way. So we try and ask questions, and luckily in a scenario like the Bozzy run where we had to deal with, getting visas and stuff, we both talk all the time anyway. So it's not, we were very quick. We had to make quick decisions, and
that was definitely a thinking on your feet thing. I mean, when we had to get the Korea visas, so like we had to go to South Korea for the last show tour, and they were super laggy on getting us information. So we didn't get the information until the last minute, and there was really like almost no time to get visas, and a couple people were already going to be out of the country, so didn't have their passports. So we had to start sending passports around the country. I started writing letters to the government saying why Chad needed to go get another passport, and he's going there and waiting in line to get a passport same day. Same thing's happening in Detroit. They're both sending them to me in LA, and we're getting South Korean visas with 9 minutes to spare so everyone can get in the country. It's that kind of stuff that, you can't plan for, and you just have to react.
Yeah, I wanted to just on touch of this, like, when you can't plan for shit, especially when it comes to flying. We had a show in Ireland. The next day, we were supposed to have a show in the UK, where we did. And mid-show in Ireland, I got a text from our agent saying, sorry, the UK won't let you in, something to deal with visas, or the COS. It's just part of the visa process. And, working with my travel agent, the only way we were able to enter the country, because we were supposed to cross the ferry on a tour bus, was we had to fly to a whole different country just to fly into to the UK, so it looked like we were entering from a different country other than Ireland. And this is because of the Brexit things going on. I don't know if you guys are aware of this, but that one bit us in the ass.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. When we get out to Europe or Asia, it gets wild with just things you run into, That's for sure. Yeah, Stitch mentioned ferries in the chat, which is something we should probably touch on in ground transportation. But
Let's talk about it with buses real quick.
Stitch was there.
talk about what?
Let's talk about it in buses real quick.
Yeah, we can cover ferries and buses. They're very interesting. Let's keep it rolling. We still got a few subjects left.
It's gonna be kind of long. Sorry.
Good stuff though. Let's move on. We got hotels, buses, and customs carnet stuff left. So let's run into hotels. We'll let Manny take the lead, and then we will dive in to more hotel questions. So start sending those if you got them. Manny, you have the floor.
Cool. So with hotels, just like everything else we've been talking about, and the theme of the day is kind of know your artists, know their needs, know the crew, know their needs. Same for the hotel. So, depending on like the budget, you'll look for hotels that kind of fit in the budget. And kind of what Levi was mentioning last week, he'll use like hotels.com, kind of look up hotels in the area. For hotels, I'll look for my crew, my artists. They'll want to have like a hotel with a pool, a gym, stuff like that, laundry, those kind of needs like that. So you'll kind of want to know what everybody's schedule is for the day, for if they have time for laundry, if they have the facilities at the hotel, that'd be an awesome win for you. Another thing to look for, depending on the size of your tour, but you're still going to need parking. I know it's simple, but it's something to keep in mind, especially if you're traveling in a tour bus and a trailer. You just want to make sure you have that kind of space available at the hotel and advanced ahead of time, so that way when you go to the hotel, it's not an issue. A quick template I can show that I work with the travel agent that we have for Chelsea. Let me see if I get my screen going. Can everybody see? One sec. You guys see my screen?
Yep.
All right.
Bro, your desktop is an anxiety attack.
Yo, dog, it is not a joke.
I've been there.
Oh, oh.
So hold up 1 second. So you can see like the kind of like the date and the city, the venue, hotel, address. It's just a quick one so that everybody can kind of see it at the same time. This is the kind of thing that's shared with the travel agent, the managers, anybody who kind of needs to know the info. For some artists, like their parents will want to know where they are. So they'll kind of look at something like this. So you'll see like the city, the date. If there's a venue that you want to have that's close to the hotel, some travel agents like to work that way, kind of know what venue you're at, so that way they can look at hotels close in the area. So you'll see like the hotel, the address of it. If they want to add that kind of information, like the distance, show times. But on the notes, I'll also add like the needs I have for the people and crew for the stay. So like I need a single room for the driver, the other driver, 2 total, early check-in if possible. And that's something you want to work on with the travel agent. Like, what do you need specifically? Do you need them to check in early, or is it one of those things where we're going to get there right on time for check-in anyway? And they'll put in like the confirmation number, so that way if there's a problem at the hotel, it's either something you can give to the hotel or have call the travel agent, have them deal with it if it's something that's not easily fixed. Kind of the totals, kind of working on budget. One of the things that we were working on previously for budget, you'll kind of have for every room, saying if it's a credit card authorization. That's something I'll touch on a little bit as well, a little further down, but you just want to make sure you have all this kind of information. It's easily readable, so that way anybody working on it can just do what they need to do. All right. Stop share. All right, cool. So with that as well, and same with the needs of the crew, you kind of want to know how many rooms you need. I have some artists that I'm sure everybody does as well, where they'll need their own room. Then I have artists that want to share a room with the band. They want to share with a tour manager, a security guard, something like that. It really depends on what they're looking for and what they need. But a lot of artists have different ones, so everything is going to be case specific. So, like we said before, kind of know what everybody wants to do. Another, have conversation with your artists of especially like, what are they going to do? Or is this something where they're just going in to shower and they're going right to the show, or they're going to be there all day? So they'll want to have, like I said before, the pool, the gym, laundry. You want to be by a mall or something, and by you know, some places we go to, like we're in Orlando, they want to go to Disney World on a day off. So hotel close to there, that's nice, you know, nothing crazy, but fits in the budget, gets everything done, and everybody's happy with it. Same with the crew. So some crews, they want to have their own room. Bigger tours, like when I was on like BB Rex's tour, everybody on the crew had their own room. Then there's some tours where it's a little smaller budget. You'll have the band in one room, audio crew in one room, or tour manager and somebody else, or production manager in another room. So just kind of getting to know what everybody needs, make sure it's good with financial, make sure it's good with management, your artists, kind of just make sure everybody's in check. Same for check-in time. We kind of touched on it with logistics. You kind of just want to make sure you're going to show up on time for check-in if it's something you're checking in early. So if it's a show day and you have, you know, you got to be at sound check or load in at 9 a.m. or something like that, you just want to make sure the travel agent knows to let the hotel be aware that, you know, maybe the driver or the artist and band are going to check in early. So make sure that's all situated ahead of time. Again, can't stress that enough. Make sure everything's done ahead of time. So that way you're not showing up and the hotel hits you with, we're overbooked or we oversold or something like that, and there's no rooms available, and not those guys are standing around and looking at you for answers. Let's see, case specific, but another thing that we wanted to mention to you guys is going to cities like New York. New York can get kind of crazy with buses and larger vehicles like trucks and, you know, vans with trailers. So what we usually do, or, you know, other people do other things, but there's a lot of times where, you know, you'll have to do like a drop or something like that. Or you'll have to have the bus go to like Secaucus, New Jersey. Sometimes you'll have to do like a trailer drop, and you just want to coordinate that. There's like, bus drivers usually have numbers of people they can call to have a pickup truck pick up the trailer, take it into New York City, then have the bus go into New York City, depending on what you need, or having just everybody catch a ride from the hotel in Jersey to New York City. Something you got to work out, especially with the venue as well. Some venues do allow you to park your bus at the venue. I was just at Terminal 5 with Chelsea, and they let us park the bus for 2 days. Just leave it there for 2 days. But that's something like you have to coordinate with the venue. You just can't assume that that's just going to happen. So with like a New York trip like that, you'll want to coordinate with your travel agent. We need bus parking. We want to leave it at the hotel. And it's a little extra of a fee, but it's not too much, especially for what is the risk of driving into New York with a trailer. You don't want to hit any cars. You don't want to piss off your bus drivers. A lot of the bus companies don't like to do stuff like that. So you just want to make sure you take all the precautions you need. Just going down. So another thing you want to do with the hotels as well is you'll want to have the room keys kind of ready to go for, you know, your drivers or your artists, especially the artists. You don't want to have them waiting around, standing at front desk, fighting with them for hotel keys, especially if the room is not under their name. Which is another thing we'll get onto next, which is like an alias for your artist. It's really case specific. Some artists do, some artists don't, you know, but yeah, you kind of want to work with them on like an alias they want to go by or something like that. Like I know there was an artist, who was it, Jeezy? That's Johnny Cash or something like that.
Probably shouldn't.
Yeah, but so yeah, you'll go in like that and just make sure you have an alias worked out in the room, checked in for them, so they can just pick up the keys real smooth and just go in. Like an off day and off day for shows and show days. So depending on if it's a show day or not, what I like to do is have like a hotel that's close to the venue. Just so like if it's possible, maybe the bus driver or the artist can walk if it's like a block away. But if that's like a quick little Uber, we can do something we usually do, or get a taxi or something, you know, some kind of transportation. Most of the venues have like runners. Sometimes they're able to transport the bus driver to the hotel real quick and get that done real fast. And then on off days, that's, like I said before, something I like to park by a mall. Bigger parking spots, you know, bigger parking lot, usually not a problem with like paying for parking. Go by the airport if you need to. Really want to look into like cities like that where, like, if you're in Chicago, you know, sometimes it's a little tricky to park in Chicago, so you got to stay out a little bit on the outside. parked by like the malls out there or something like that. But every city is case specific. Some cities have just bigger parking lots. Some cities don't, like New York City. You just want to kind of keep that in mind. And then entry points as well for your safety for the crew and the artists. You just want to kind of make sure if it's a hotel that's like right smack dab in the middle of the city, you kind of want to make sure the quickest way to get them in, quickest way to get them out, just in case anything. You just don't want a lot of fans to crowd around them and kind of ambush them as we're trying to, do something simple like just check in or just leave. Just kind of want to be aware of all that kind of stuff. Is the conversation you can just call the hotel or your travel agent. Maybe they can suggest a hotel that they know usually accommodates things like this. And I'm sure there's a lot of other things we can hit on real quick. I just want to make sure I touched on those that we wanted to get into. So if anybody has any questions or want to add anything, go ahead.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks like we got some questions. I saw some people talking about keeping up with local politics. It's interesting, especially when you travel internationally. I remember I was in South Africa as well with Bryson. I think Cotton was out there, and we had to hire, some armed security guards just because there was a lot of robberies going on at the time. So as a tour manager, I feel like that's definitely important for sure, is to keep up, maybe talk with your promoters or people bringing you in. Usually there's artist liaisons when you're traveling internationally that'll kind of be there. Their only job is to just guide you and make sure that everything goes as smooth as it can.
And you could try and hire outside security too. Like I remember we were supposed to do a show in Saudi Arabia, and I had reached out to the promoter to get me with local security companies so I could coordinate for like 24/7 security with us, just depending on like where you're at. That's something that is obviously a case by case basis, but go through the promoter usually because they have the connect on it.
Yeah. Camilla, I saw you had a question about room blocking. If you want to unmute yourself.
Hi, yes. So my question was, have the tour managers ever considered cost-effective ways to accommodate everyone's needs? And I know I have some experience in a hotel, being a front desk agent, and that's something that we normally get from a lot of our incoming guests. Was like, okay, does this hotel offer room blocking, or do you do individual booking? So that's what I was curious to know.
Yeah, man, I'm typically, man, you can go into it.
Oh yeah, that's something I work with my travel agent. Like usually they'll able to tell us like with that hotel that we're looking into if they do room blocking. If not, then we just kind of check them, buy them individually.
Yeah,
typically
the
rule of thumb from our travel agent was that anything over like 9 rooms is considered a group, and then you have like a group booking, and it's all, and like the rule, and you should sign a contract so you can't get out of it, or you get to pay the money up front. You can't really get out of it unless the show is canceled. I know Manny had cancellation policy on his grid, and that's something that's important to note as well, knowing how far out you can cancel. And usually if the show is canceled, you can cancel no matter what, but knowing if you can cancel rooms within 48 hours, 24 hours, or what that is, because your plans will change sometimes, and you don't want to get like screwed paying for rooms you're not using. But the more rooms you book, the harder those cancellation policies become.
Yeah.
Yep. And you want to touch on the perk of room blocking as well, Jordan or Manny? Just like the pro of it, why people do it.
I mean, you get better prices.
You get better prices, and usually they put the rooms like close together. If that's something that, like, as a tour manager, you want to make sure you're close to the people that you want to wake up or something like that. You just want to be kind of in the same area.
And being like, when you have a group at the hotel, they usually take better care of you. If it's depending on the level of the hotel you're staying at too. They'll have, you want to have usually advance like what time you're getting there, so you have like the envelopes waiting, and no one has to do anything but show their ID real quick, get their envelope, and go upstairs. The nicer hotels are better about that. Obviously, the bigger the group you have, the more aware they are that you guys are coming in, because you're you're filling the hotel for the weekend. So
nice. Let's go to Malachi. I saw you had a question.
Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. My question was: is there a maybe a checklist or a booklet that you guys put together for all these logistics that you go through? It's a lot of information that you guys have to cover.
That's a really good question. I think we actually have some, right, guys? Like when we all start working on a tour together, typically it's like we just make a big ass checklist, like whether it's, I'm working on the production side with guys like Griffin, TJ, and Justin and Cotton and Jordan or whoever, Manny, they're working on the tour management, PM stuff. So we kind of sometimes we do a big shared note and we just have like a list of all the stuff we got to attack, all the way from like a carnet, which we'll get into that in a second, to like, is there a meet and greet backdrop? Do we have that ordered? There's just so many little things that you can fuck up on.
Malachi, I wanted to, there's part of the advance, I don't know if you guys see me. Sorry about that. Part of our advancing is, we have like a template that we put in our notes in Master Tour. And using Master Tour is kind of our checklist, making sure you have each section filled out or details that are missing. That's kind of, that's what I use for myself at least, because it's all centralized in one spot. And I go back through it, show to show, I can usually pinpoint what details are missing, what else needs to be done. So I'd say Master Tour is kind of like that master checklist for me.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, Master Tour is great too. We'll get into that in session 5, I believe now, because we flip-flopped 2 of them. Good question though. That's super clutch. Having a big list.
Hey, I was actually going to add on for Malachi's question. Just remember, it'll always change from artist to artist. I have like a base checklist that I use, but as I learn the artist, as I the different things, smoking fees and, different things that specific artist needs, I make a separate checklist for that artist to make sure that I'm covering everything that they need.
Gotcha.
Can you touch on smoking fees a little bit and kind of the experience that you've had
Yeah.
in situation, and how important it is to know what those smoking fees in 5-star hotels are?
Who did you say?
You.
Oh, I saw Manny moving. Super important. I deal with rappers a lot. So rappers like to smoke. They not only like to smoke cigarettes, they like to smoke weed. And hotels are not fond of smoking weed in their hotels. Every hotel has a smoking fee. I think a base fee ranges between $250 to $500. And it is not for the stay of the room. It could be per day. If they go into your room and they clean your room, they're like, oh, okay, we cleaned the smoke smell out, when they really didn't. They could charge you the next day. This is, again, why I enjoy using a travel agent, because the travel agent can tell me off the bat what this person, what the hotel is going to say about smoking. As you go up in hotel types, from, I don't think anybody's really staying in 2 stars, but 3-star, 4-star, 5-star, and up, the hotels will take those suites that your artist is staying in and smoking in and make them unsellable until they can completely clean them. So you have to remember, not only are you paying a smoking fee, but you're having to pay for all of the drapes to come down and be dry cleaned, which have to be dry cleaned how they say they have to be cleaned. And then also, if you're staying in a $2,000 a night suite, they're going to charge you for 5 days $2,000 because they can't resell that room until they completely get the smoke smell out. So it's just very important to know that stuff. And on top of just the smoke smell, damage to the room. If you're leaving, again, I deal with rappers. If you're leaving condom wrappers all over the floor, you're smoking it, you're shaking it off. And I had an artist whose friends, we would always book him 2-bedroom suites so that he could have the main suite, and then a couple of his boys could be in the room with him, or in the hotel suite with him, and they would take the extra room or the couch, whatever the case may be. But one of his friends carved a stick figure. He was always drawing stuff. He was one of the art guys on the team. and drew something into a really expensive desk at the Ritz-Carlton, and it was like a $20,000 desk. So they charged his Amex card $20,000 for that charge. Of course, we went back and disputed it via the travel agent and all these different things and met at a common ground. But it's just knowing that this stuff can actually happen, because they don't care. They have your credit card information. They will come and charge you for it. Camila, don't get anxious. And you know what? And she just said something. She said, I'd probably have to do a room inspection to mitigate all of that. That's a really good idea. That's an amazing, that's part of being a tour manager.
Yeah.
If you know your artist smokes, I actually go into the room before my artist goes in there, because I don't want there to be any damage that we get blamed for. But after he comes out, I want to know what the damage was so that I can manage his expectations. Well, you got that $10,000 charge because you smoked out the room for 5 days.
Sometimes it's as simple as just getting rid of some ashes too, like hiding the evidence, essentially.
Yeah, that's something too. Like when I have other tours where I check everybody in, I'll get a copy of everybody's hotel room, copy of the key, and I'll write down like a little note on my phone or something like what room number that person is in. And I'll go to every room after we're checking out and just check for anything they leave behind. I've been on tours where people are just forgetful. They're not really smoking or anything, but they'll leave like their phone charger or their phone or the laptop charger or the show laptop or something like that. And I'll go in the room and just get it, something like that, something simple.
Yep.
One last thing too, also be very clear. If your artist is smoking in the room, he's the artist. He's flipping the bill for everything. But if you got a drummer that's smoking in a room and gets a whole like a smoking fee, that is that drummer's responsibility. It needs to come out of that drummer's check, out of his per diem, whatever it is. Don't let your artist feel like you're going to let them get charged for somebody else. And I've even had, it's always the drummers, but I've had drummers say like, well, so-and-so came to my room and smoked. Well, you're a responsible adult. You're responsible enough to be on the road touring as a profession. You're responsible enough to say, hey, don't smoke in my room because I'm gonna have to pay for it. Go to your room.
Yep. Yeah, that's definitely a good thing to touch on. Let's keep it rolling. A formal meeting where we're all aware of tour needs. Tobin, I saw you said, do we do full stage sound production tours of semis? Yeah, we do those. Want to keep things rolling. Any other questions for Braden? Feel free to unmute yourself. I saw you had one here.
Yeah, I just had one. So like when checkout is typically at like 11 a.m. or something for main or for hotels and stuff, but the call time for the artist is until like 3 p.m. or something. Do you typically like have to book an extra night so they're not kicked out at 11 and just kind of sit around or something? And this is like, yeah, the bus is leaving at midnight or something.
Great question. What do you guys like to do for that? I feel like some tour managers have different strategies for that.
Right. So if I know about that in advance, I'll ask the booking agent to kind of do a late checkout. Some places like we have like a gold membership or whatever hotel service it is, they'll let you check out later. Like there's some that check out at 2 or 3 when you have a certain status. So just be aware, like with the booking agent, if they have a membership there or something like that. Sometimes it's just easy as just calling the front desk, like, hey, can we request a late checkout?
Along with that is consolidating. If you can't afford rooms, if you have to pay for the late checkout and you can't afford all of them, just consolidate, your crew maybe into one double so they can at least move their shit in there and hang out. But of course, making sure the artist has his own privately. But I've dealt with consolidating pretty often as well.
Cool. And if you get into a situation where you have like a midnight roll time for the bus, typically that'd be like on an off day situation where you're driving through, and we're gonna get into that in the next section right now about bus logistics and bus routing. But you typically would try and like check in around 10 or 11 in the morning and then stay in that room all day, and then you'll leave around midnight. So you basically paid for the room for the night, but you're only going to be there for the 12 hours. Typically if you're there that long, you can't get like a half day rate. Sometimes, if it's just middle of nowhere, you'll get lucky depending on what relationship your travel agent has with the people, but typically that's what you're looking at.
Yeah, definitely. Camilla had a good point too with asking AM front desk agent. Obviously, she's from that neck of the woods, so that's good to know. Honestly, for from our perspective, is there a reason why you asked the AM front desk agents?
Yeah, because the night ones will forget and they'll won't tell anybody in the hotel. So you got to remind them in the morning.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, hotel statuses definitely help as well. Awesome, good stuff on hotels, everybody. Let's keep it rolling. Buses. We have buses and custom Carnet International stuff left. Let's roll right into buses. Hopefully, we can wrap this up by 20-30 minutes. The rest of this session, but Jordan and Justin, feel free to take the floor for buses.
Cool. So I'll just start off real quick by going over what types of buses there are. There's a few different kinds. Since some people haven't been on bus tours yet, or if you have been, this will be a little bit of a repetitive, but anyways. So you have your star coach, which is typically for your artists, and that typically has 6 bunks. There are some variations that have 9 bunks. Those are kind of hard to find, but always a gem when you can. And a star coach typically holds just the artist and then their immediate crew. So like maybe their assistant, their security, the photographer, and whoever else they really want, like their boys. And those will typically have what are called condo bunks. So condo bunks are typically bunks go like 3 down instead of going 3 down. It's only 2. So they're a little bigger. You can sit up in those. Those are nice, a little more luxurious. And on the star coach, a lot of times you're looking to have a slide out. So like the left side of the bus will pop out like an extra 3 or 5 feet or so. I'm not really exactly sure the distance, but the artist room pops out, and then the front can also pop out too. So knowing the different types of buses and what you're getting is important. And I'll continue on that in a second. So going up off of the star buses is the crew buses, and the crew buses are going to be usually 12 bunks, and those will have either the option to be a slide or a non-slide. You're paying more money for the slides, and whether it's a single slide or a double slide, and you're also paying more money based on the year of the bus. So the newer it is, the more money. I mean, me and Cotton were getting quotes for like Juice World buses, and all of them were around like $80,000, $90,000, or maybe something like that. And the 2019 star coach from this one company was like 120 grand, but it was like a mansion on wheels. So having that conversation, knowing what your artist wants to spend and what to expect is important. Some sort of specialized buses, they have, studio buses and things like that. Those are definitely more specialized and harder to find if your artist wants that. That's kind of a scavenger hunt you got to go on. We did do some hunting for one time, and there are some out there, and you can find them. That typically have but the artist is kind of sacrificing a bed at that point. It's usually the back lounge will turn into a studio, and they'll sleep in a bunk there. So you want to make sure it's a condo bunk for them. Oh, what else are we going into? So number of bunks, condo versus regular. We talked about that. Typically, so when you have 12 bunks on a crew bus, you can't expect to use all 12 typically unless you really need to. It's important to keep one open for a double driver situation where you would have a long haul drive and you need to bring in another driver because that driver's got to sleep someplace while the other driver's driving, so they can alternate and continue to go. So you need to have a bunk for them. And then it's always nice to have a junk bunk, and junk bunk is just a term for an empty bunk. If you don't have that, I mean, it's not the end of the world, but I've been on a bus where we had 14 people, so it's completely filled plus the artist in the back, and that can get pretty crammed, but that's a typical situation. And then also for a star coach, there's a couple different situations you could have. You could have a room in the back that's a lounge that's converted into a bedroom, and that's kind of where they'll just slide a bed in, and you still have a table and things, and it's kind of like a makeshift bedroom. It's nice, but it's not as nice as a traditional star coach where you can have a full bedroom with a bathroom specifically for the artist and a little closet and things like that. There's all different variations of luxury that you can get into, and that's just stuff you have to figure out what their needs are depending on the level of the tour. But you can typically convert any back lounge bus to be a room for the artist. So any level tour that you get on like that'd be nice for them at least. What else we got here? Let's see. One last thing I'm going to touch on before I pass it off to Justin is just kind of dividing up the buses. It's like one of the most important things and the first things you need to do when you start getting hired for a tour is to get that crew list and find out who's on tour, because that's going to set everything up for you. You're going to know how many of everything you need, where you need them, and what it's going to cost. And that's how you can start figuring out your budget and playing that game and finding out how you're going to get everyone from point A to point B the most comfortable. So, well, like we discussed the star coach, figuring out who's going on, then who's going to go on. Typically, you'll have a bus with your A party, so that your A party is like on your star coach, and then you have your immediate management crew. So, like maybe it's your tour manager, your production manager, and upper level people in the crew. They're on a bus, and then you have a bus for the band as well, and some of the other maybe some of the other creative guys. And then you could have another bus for the vendors. And those are the outside production people that you've hired, the sound guys, the lighting guys, the video guys, that kind of stuff. But it's all about knowing the number of bunks you have and making sure that it all fits and everyone has a space, and that you're not getting more buses than you need and things like that. Because obviously, we discussed last week in budgeting, buses are expensive. You never want to have to get more than you need. So if you can cut down a bus in any way, that's definitely something you want to do. I'm going to pass it off to Justin now. He's going to talk about bus routing and how to time out where you're going based on your departure times, your parking, and your hotel arrivals and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the most important part about the bus, is plotting that out in advance and knowing how you're going to move around, so nothing's a surprise and you know your ETAs to everywhere. And I'll pass it off to Justin.
Yeah. So, I mean, this, to me personally, this is like one of the biggest parts of the job, because this is where you can incur a lot of additional charges that you didn't initially budget for. So we talk about drives and double drives and overdrives, clump them all together. Basically, your drives are just from city to city. As the tour manager, you need to be on top of what time your show ends, what time your loadout will end, what time you can, what time you have to be off of the previous show's site, meaning how long your buses and trucks can stay on site, how early you can get to the next city, to the next venue, if it's a show day the next day. There's just so many little pieces and parts that go into this. Because if you have a show in New York City one night and the next night your show is in Philadelphia, I think the drive is like an hour and a half, 2 hours, something like that, in the bus. It's a short drive. You don't want to show up in Philadelphia and not have anywhere to park your bus because the venue's not open, or they have another show that hasn't rolled out yet. So you have to be very particular with that. As far as double drives are concerned, these kind of go different ways. I think it's within like the last 2 years, maybe the last 3 years, the Department of Transportation changed or started enforcing how bus drivers, how much time they can be on the road. They have a logging system that every bus has it, unless it's privately owned, which is not impossible to find, but it's not very common to find a bus that's privately owned right now. But they all have a logging system that tracks how long the driver is on the road. Drivers just can't be on the road after a certain amount of hours. This comes into play for us because you run into your overdrives and your double overdrives. In situations where you have a show in one city and the next city is maybe 1,000 miles away, you would have to bring in another driver, bring in a double driver. You would fly a driver from wherever their home base is. They would fly into the last city, meet you there. Your driver would start driving. When they get to that point, they would switch. And that's where Jordan said having an extra bunk on the bus is important, because you can allow that driver that already did a shift of driving to sleep. When you work with your bus companies, when you work with your drivers, they can be very lenient on that. Don't bank on that. I've had some drivers that just understand it's a super budgeted tour. We have all 12 bunks full. And so they'll just sleep on the couch, maybe kick them down a couple extra bucks. All of this is to prevent crashes. It's a safety thing. They don't want drivers driving for a certain amount of time. What was I going to say? Overdrives. Planning out your route is super, super important because you can get overdrives. I know we've mentioned overdrives in a previous section, and I think we may mention it again. You hit your first overdrive at 450 miles. Once you hit 450 miles in a drive, you have to pay the driver double, or you have to pay them an extra day's salary for that overdrive. Again, these are preventable depending on how you break up the drives. If you have a double driver on that run, but that's why I said these are so important, because you can incur so many extra charges that just weren't expected. If we know that going from Seattle to San Francisco, we're gonna hit an overdrive because we're gonna have a day off in between, so we're gonna stop somewhere in Oregon, but you're still gonna have an overdrive on one of those days. So you can prepare management and say, hey, we're breaking up the drive, but we're gonna incur an overdrive on one of these days. Now, the other time where you may get an overdrive where it's just at the artist's discretion, when you have different parties, as Jordan mentioned, if you have an A party, a B party, C party, however you have your buses broken down, the A party typically isn't going to stop in Medford, Oregon. I say Medford because Medford is one of those random cities that you stop in on the way from Seattle going down to San Francisco. A lot of times your artist isn't going to want to stop, so they're just going to drive through. In those situations, you're going to need to have a double driver come in that can switch off with your main driver. And it's just, again, you're gonna have to incur the flight fee for the double driver. You have to incur the fee for the additional driver's salary, which you would be paying anyway if you're paying the overdrives. And yeah, typically the B and C party buses, they will not take those charges. Now, one thing that I'll mention, the trend has kind of been changing recently because crew people are saying, hey, we don't want to stop in Medford, California, or Medford, Oregon. We want to go straight forward. That's not up to you. That is literally up to the tour manager and up to management and the artist if they want to incur that fee. I have, however, had some crew people say, hey, if we all put a day's worth of per diem together, we can cover this overdrive. But that's on you guys. I mean, that's on them. You can't take that fee for the artist or for management just because your crew people don't want to stay in an off-brand city or whatever the case may be. Also, mapping out the route. If you're having to stop in some off cities, try to plan them so that they're in desirable cities. Again, going from Seattle down to Northern California, there's really just not anywhere to stop. You're kind of just stuck in Medford, and there's another something Falls, Klamath Falls in
Twin
Oregon.
Falls is in Idaho when you go to.
Oh, is it? Okay. So yeah, they're random places. Is it okay? Yeah, you just don't have a choice there. But if you're going from, I think it's St. Louis to Dallas or anywhere in Texas, you can stop in Little Rock. That you're not going to catch an overdrive there. So just be mindful of that. You don't have to stop somewhere that's 425 miles. Make it somewhere that's desirable. You can get to a mall. Cotton likes to get manicures on days off. He likes to do, pamper himself, which ain't nothing wrong with that. But just try to make it so that people have something to do on their day off, so it's just not a dead day. Bus call is super important. I kind of touched on it before, but just be sure that your bus call coincides with venue curfews, with what time you have to be off the side of that venue, moving on to the next city. Typically what I do, if our time that we have to leave that venue is at 4 o'clock, I just make bus call for everybody at 2 o'clock. And then I hit my drivers and say, yo, bus call is at 2 o'clock. Everybody will be on the bus at 2 o'clock. We don't have to roll until 4 o'clock. So just be mindful of that. You can stay sleeping until 3 o'clock, 3:30, and then make your way over to the bus. But bus call is super important. We covered it in on another topic day, but people are going to miss bus call. It's unfortunate, but they're going to miss it. We don't want them to miss it. We don't want them to have to pay and figure out how to get themselves to the next city. But one monkey don't stop the show. Sometimes we got to keep moving. We got to move on to the next city without him. So if you got to leave your boy in the last city because he's not answering his phone, he got drunk, he passed out somewhere, typically a drummer, you just got to move on. It is. Typically, you just got to move on to the next city. Be reasonable about it. You know, if you're doing a long drive, nobody wants to pay a $300 Uber, you know, or some situation where they'll have to get a flight. As the tour manager, you do your due diligence, like call their phone. If you pass by the hotel on your way to the freeway, just stop the bus, jump off, go knock on the day room door, make him pull his pants up, get him on the bus, and keep it moving. But bus call is super important. That can make or break your next day. I always reference Cotton because we've toured so much together, but bus call is very important also because depending on how long the drive is, what time your load is the next day, it can make or break your load in. If you're late for load in, you can throw off your whole show day. And I have thrown off Cotton's whole day because I was trying to get somebody for bus call and he's like, yo, let's just leave him. And it's like, no, we need him. And we really didn't. So just, you know, do your due diligence, but don't be stupid. Don't mess up your whole next day trying to make sure that one person is where they need to be. The last thing I'm going to touch on by myself is New York City. It's horrible. Manny touched on it a little bit. New York City is just almost like they should just stop letting tourists come through New York City because they make it so difficult for you to come. Buses can't go into New York City. Some bus drivers will go into New York City. Some bus drivers will not go into New York City. They refuse to. I got into a big argument with the bus driver about going into New York City. Kai's nodding because he remembers. He had all of our merch in a trailer on the back, and he just refused to do it. I, just told him he had to go. You have no choice but to go. They're scared to go because they're scared of the tickets and the fines and the different things that can come. They can come. I have personally never seen a bus driver given a fine or ticket or anything. Maybe you guys can allude to this. I've just never experienced it, but
I haven't personally seen it. But they like to fight. They like to.
It's always a fight. It's always a fight. So proper planning is always the best way to go. Like Manny said, so a lot of times you do a cross load. You'll get like a budget truck or something like that. You guys will cross load everything from your trailer over into your box truck, and then you'll pull the box truck down into the city. But New York City is just this. This is why this is going so long, because logistics and advancing these things is just the most important thing. It could literally throw your whole day off. If you didn't advance a box truck, then you got to find the box truck. Then you can get your equipment down into the city. Now you have to source equipment in New York City on a show day, and they're having to deliver it. And now you have these extra charges. This is just so important.
Yeah, more times than not, a tour manager will get fired, likely because of some of the things that we just talked about.
I think a lot of tour managers earn their stripes for stuff like this. This is why we're spending so much time on it, because this is what makes or breaks you as a tour manager and gets you other gigs, is word of mouth for stuff like situations like all things that we're talking about just come up, and how you handle it is what people see, and that's very important.
Yeah, 100%.
I wanted to share a couple. Oh, sorry, Justin, you want to continue?
No. I was moving on, so do your thing.
I wanted to, before we continue, we're going to go on bus etiquette real quick in a second here, and everyone else is going to jump in, but I forgot. I wanted to share a couple of documents that I have just of a document. The first one I'm going to show you guys is a document that we delivered to Russ's management when we were trying to pitch them different buses, just as far as the quotes that we put together and kind of showing like it's also, the reason I'm showing is because it has different pictures of the different types of buses, so you guys can see that. And then the second thing I'm going to show you is a crew hotel chart, which is like has routing as far as the cities in between and the mileage and the overdrives. And that was one we put together when we were plotting to do Roddy Rich before. That didn't exactly go that way. But I'm going to show you that, guys, that just so you can see how it all looks. Let me pull this Russ thing up first here. So we just delivered. Everything else aside, we just try and make it look nice and make it look aesthetically pleasing and presentable so they can read everything. So here's we have the quotes. Obviously, we went through quotes last week, so we won't touch on that too much. Let me get down here to some pictures. Okay, so here, for example, so we have Arrow here, and they put together a quote for a star coach as well as 2 crew coaches here. And then we go down and we have the star pictures. So here's an example of one. Now, this isn't one of our favorites, by the way, but this is an example of one of the options here. You can see that we got bathroom. Everything's lit. It's a little older, you could tell, a little outdated. This is the back star room. So this is a traditional like star room for the artist, not a converted back room or anything like that. It's another view of that. They got their own shower. That's pretty important. And then here's an example of the crew bus. This is actually a pretty decent crew bus. Here's the back lounge. Sorry, it's getting kind of, I don't know why it's so crazily inflated. That's crazy. Okay. Roberts Brothers, this is actually one of our favorites, so we'll show this real quick for a nicer star. We'll zoom out. Here we go. Yeah, so this is a bit nicer of a star coach. This is one we were trying to recommend, actually. You can see the back room here is super nice. Linens look nice. Bed looks big. Nice bathroom for them. Big lounge in the front there. And then these are the bunks that we were talking about as well. All right, cool. So we can get out of this. Move on to the hotels we were discussing. So here we go. Hang on. Let me just. Sorry. All right. Can you guys see this?
Yep.
Want to see this? Okay, cool. So this is kind of a grid we put together, like similar to what Manny was showing about with the hotels and how we plotted out. But it's kind of got what's important over here to note is the cities and the states. So for every off day, we have it plotted out as far as where we're going to go. So on this drive from Portland to San Francisco, you can see you're going to stop here in Oregon. And knowing, like, do we need bus parking? So having a tab for that, knowing what time we're going to be there, approximately what time you need to leave. Is this going to be an overdrive? How many overdrives do you have on the tour total? DD is just for a double driver because the drive is too long between 2 show days. So Georgia to Atlanta, or we had a show in Atlanta and then a show in Washington. And the only way to get there was going to be to drive it straight through, but you were going to need to have 2 drivers because it was over 600 miles or over 10 hours. So all of this stuff is like how you can plot out your buses and make sure that everything runs smoothly. And that'll just make your day easier, and it will make your life easier on the road, not having to think of where we're stopping in a couple of days in this random drive and not moving things around too much. It gives you a good base to start off of. Obviously, things will change, but it helps a lot to have a good base. And that's that.
Sweet. I guess we could touch on, let's not spend too much time on bus etiquette.
Yeah.
But everyone just let's do this. Everyone just give maybe 1 or 2 things that you mention on bus etiquette that you've seen. Obviously, we could probably go for days on this, like where do the shoes go, whatever else. But let's start with Jordan and then just keep passing around.
No pooping on the bus.
Obviously, yeah. Number one.
Number 1 rule: no pooping on the bus. You just can't. It's not even like don't do it because it's bad. It's like don't do it because it will break the bus, and then the bus will have to not continue. And I've gotten into an argument with an artist once or twice about this because some buses have like grinders and you can do it, but pretty much nobody can, and it's definitely a no-no. And also keep the bus. This is like it's like the biggest thing. Keep the bus clean. The bus driver will clean the bus every day, but he's also not your mother. And there is no reason that it should be a mess for you or for your artist, if your crew. It is just like the fucking worst thing ever to wake up in the morning and everything is a disaster.
Yeah. Awesome. Justin, what do you think? What's 1 or 2 things?
Just everybody's adults. Just respect people's space. Like, come on, man. Just be respectful. I've had so many horrible experiences. People invading your space. Like, your bunk is your home. At my house, I got security cameras, and a security alarm. I can't have that on the bus. So I'm trusting that you're not going to go on my bunk, even if it's just a charger. Just ask me. Just ask me to use my charger. Just remember to be very, very respectful of people, and don't shit on the bus.
Manny Cotton.
Yeah, sharing common space, you know, like if everybody's working in the back lounge, they leave stuff all over the place. You don't want to walk into that and then have like cups and snacks next to laptops and stuff like that. You don't want to have anything like that. Also, I would, label your personal food if you want to, like some people feel weird about sharing snacks, some people don't, but I would just always label my stuff just so people know, like I'm just putting it out there. Also, I wanted to mention too, like know where your bus is going at the end of the tour, like routing it back.
That's a great point. Great point.
Yeah.
Getting everything where it needs to go back.
Yeah.
It's one of the most commonly forgotten things. You just are like, oh, the tour's done. It's not done for us as the tour managers until every piece of gear, everything. I mean, even months after you get the wrap, the budget wrap. So the tour's not even done yet. Yeah, that's great. Cotton, I guess we could just hand it to you if you want to ride into some customs things. You don't need to go super crazy in depth, but I think I saw a question on
Right, Chad. Once before we get off bus etiquette, this should go out without saying, but always, every time you get on and off, and always check as well and make sure your bus door is locked.
Great point.
Oh yeah, that's probably the most important thing. I personally had the bus broken into while we were playing a show. Manny, were you out there on that?
Yeah,
one?
it was in Sacramento.
Yeah, they stole everything.
Ace of Spades.
Yeah,
Ace of Spades. Yep.
Yeah. That's a great point, Levi. Probably the most important thing, and then not shitting on the bus is probably number two.
One quick thing on bus etiquette.
Yeah.
Common area, like Manny said, everything of yours that is yours needs to fit in your bunk or like in a closet. Like it does not belong on the couches or anything like that. Like people, you don't leave your backpacks out, you don't leave your shoes out. Like people will get pissed about that. Like everything of yours needs to go in your bunk. Like it's not really, that's just how it is.
Yeah, man, I feel like we could go on for days and days on the etiquette. Maybe we'll jump into it a little bit on another session. Gianna, I saw you mention if if anyone in this audience ends up working with us, absolutely, you can reach out to anyone. We have a number of group chats. That's the whole point of it. See Justin shaking his head. We ignore him sometimes, but everyone else, if anyone can reach out and get help on anything. That's the nice thing is if it's anything from the production stuff to, you can hit Cotton or Jordan or Manny or Justin or Levi, anyone really will all help out. That's kind of the main point focus here is like, we are a team. We want to help each other. We got each other's backs because we've all learned a lot from doing it the wrong way and doing it on our own. That's why we have this team now. So, Tobin, I think you had one question. We'll take that and then we'll move on to Carne stuff.
Yeah, I was just asking, thinking about touring in the current environment, do you guys foresee, some sort of tour happening where artists are going to be having to be social distanced from each other and the audiences, and how do you foresee approaching something like that? Like for example, I just saw, I think it was Keith Urban did a show at a drive-in theater recently with kind of a skeleton crew. So thinking about, alternative touring strategies like that, what are your thoughts? How would you approach something like that?
I think you'll start to see some of these, Niku was mentioning the drive-through concerts. Like, I think we're going to start to see some random stuff like that pop up, but nothing. I mean, there's going to be social distancing, but I don't think we're not going to get back to where we were for sure for a while. I don't think we mentioned it, I think in the first session, but I don't think we'll have full tour buses like we used to, maybe at least not for a while, like with the 12 bunkers. I mean, some rappers we work with, they'll fit fucking 15 people in these buses somehow. Yeah, I mean, anyone else want to jump in on that before we move on?
I think it's hard to really say right now, Tobin, because it's ever changing with what's going on in the world right now. It's ever changing. So it's really hard to tell. It just will not be what you've been accustomed to for years. And that's why it's great that we're doing this, but all of us that are on this panel, we're going to be adjusting once we come out of this as well, because there's just going to be so many changes. So while we're trying to bring everybody to a common level, once now we're at a common level, now we can all grow together and learn what those new changes are going to be moving forward.
Totally. Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Awesome. Cotton, let's give you the floor here. If you want to just talk maybe 5, I know you got your baby right there. Look at
Hi,
this.
Mari.
Just give us a super quick rundown of
Yeah,
some Carnage stuff, and we'll move on.
I won't go too involved. First thing first is that hold on. One of the important things is to realize that these people are not your friend. Border agents tend to have the worst attitudes known to man. So knowing that is all the more reason you need to have your shit together when you come to them. Because if you don't, they literally have the power to deny you without any, you can't put up a fight, any argument. They can just really fuck up your life. So knowing that kind of helps prepare you to make sure, you have all your ducks in a row. And that important duck is making sure everyone has a passport. So many times I've heard people say, we don't need a passport to go to Canada, or Canada is on a routing sheet, and they just don't mention they don't have a passport, and they don't realize it until you get to the border, and they get denied entry. So making sure your crew has passports. Typically, when you get to the border, I'm specifically talking about Canada. Europe is a whole another conversation that we really don't have the time to go into it. But just making sure your crew has them. Typically, the TM will collect passports after the show, heading to the border. So like we had a show in Detroit. After the Detroit show, we collect passports, count them. That includes the driver information or driver's passport, and he will be the one to step off the bus and present them to the agent before they call you off. Another thing to know about your crew is to know what their criminal history is. As a TM, you know a lot about, as a TM, you know basically everything about your crew. You kind of have to be able to do your job. There's been times where, we get to the border and a guy had a gun charge from 10 years ago on his record that he didn't mention, or the bus driver had a DUI from 12 years ago that was still on his record. All the things that Canada has the right to deny you if they want to. So another thing is just to know who's on your bus. So just have that conversation. You typically run into this, again, not to point them out, but you tend to run this, and when you talk about rap groups, obviously, rappers are involved in activities that other people aren't, just to say it. So knowing your crew and knowing what they've done in the past helps you and make sure there's no surprises at the border. And then like with gears and stuff, as far as carnage and stuff, it can be expensive. Taking it to the production side, knowing, just like your crew, you need to know your gear. This is a sample gear manifest. It basically just shows you what gear is in your truck. This is, what is this? This is a video company, which is one semi for a tour. Just a manifest, this is all stuff you need to present to your agent. I think Gab mentioned it or asked about it earlier. Just like you deal with travel agents, we typically deal with a immigration and visa agent when dealing with customs and things like that. Because obviously as a TM, as a PM, you don't know everything. It's a lot of loopholes. It's a lot of, paperwork that changes by the month, by the year, that you just, it's almost impossible to keep up to date. So being able to lean on an agent to give you guidance and making sure your paperwork is straight is very important. So like I said, this is a gear manifest. This is basically shows what's in a semi. The value, the gear is worth almost $1 million. Kind of expensive. And then the next thing is just an invoice. This is for one truck, $27.90 was charged to get the truck across Canada border and back. So it can be expensive. This, like I said, this is for one truck. This tour had 3 trucks, so it's that price times 3, almost $9,000 to just import gear into Canada. So, like I said, I know this is going past 2 hours. I won't go involved, but just like anything, knowing what paperwork is needed, knowing what you need, and things like that is very important. And just like the translators, how you can lean on local promoters and stuff. When you go overseas and stuff, your local promoters and stuff will typically, if they do your job or if they do their job right, will give you all the paperwork you need to do visas and make sure you're good to come in the country. So the main thing is don't be afraid to lean on other people that might have a stronger understanding about customs and things like that. That's about it that I have.
Awesome.
I think touching on what Cotton said too, like just being prepared, but like don't be afraid to ask questions even if they seem dumb. It's better to be safe than sorry. You know, it's better to get your question answered than just to guess when you get to the border. You know.
Right. Exactly.
Absolutely.
You guys mentioned prior to
do that deep clean of the bus before you go over the border that night. Like make sure that like whatever you guys are doing on the bus and previous like no one should smoke in the bus that entire day before you guys go to Canada that night. Like that's a no-no.
Mm-hmm.
Like as soon as like you pull to the border and the bus smells like weed at all, like you're gonna get all pulled off. It's gonna be a whole situation. They'll tear that place apart. Like I've seen people get like there was like a canister with like crumbs in it in a bag like in the bay, and they found it and like it was a whole like situation. Like they don't want to mess around. Like you got to really do your due diligence, and it's up to you as a tour manager to be responsible and like make sure that that shit's A1.
I wanted to mention about carnets is the reason you have these is for import and exportation of goods and equipment, like Cotton said. But always remember that whenever you leave a country, you get your carnet stamped, you enter the next country, carnet stamped in, and then vice versa. You as a team, and that's your responsibility to get that both ways, making sure it's stamped in, stamped out, and then coming back out, stamp it out, and stamp it back in.
Also, I forgot to mention with carnets, there is I can't find the form, but there's like a universal form, like a universal carnet that works in multiple countries. So you don't need to get a different carnet per country. It's like a master carnet that has your gear that like 20 countries accept to make it kind of easier too as well.
Chad, is it cool if I show them? I think are you talking about the ATA carnet?
Yeah, I think it is ATA.
Yeah. Can I take over a screen share real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
I'll just show them what this thing looks like. So this is pretty much the cover of a carnet. It's gonna be nice and green. Just so you guys can get some eyes on it. For example, this is gonna be exporting, usually you're yellow. So when you take it to the carnet officer, they will fill out this for you. You gotta fill out some bits and pieces for them on another page as well. And then right here where it says re-importation, that's when you're going to be re-entering back into the same country you're exporting from. And then this is some kind of information that you fill out. But part of this, in this carnet, you guys will have like a documented package of all this. In this carnet is where you also keep multiple copies of that manifest that Cotton showed you. So the carnet officer can easily just see everything that they need to see and get you in and out without any troubles.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you for showing that. I've even seen, I was on tour with Ray Shremmerd, and the tour manager had he tended to hold on to weed for the artist, and he would keep it under his bunk, and he had, I think he just had a blunt under his bunk, and the dogs came through sniffing. He forgot about it because he doesn't smoke. He just held on to it for the artist, and this motherfucker ended up getting arrested right on the border. So gotta watch out. I mean, everyone always says, you know, remind your crew while you're going before borders and stuff, because a lot of, you know, people who are young and dumb and forget stuff. So definitely remind your team when you're about to pass through, maybe the night or a couple days before. Awesome. Anyone else got anything? Nothing on the carnet stuff. Let's take a couple of these questions and then we'll wrap up here. Thanks for bearing with us, guys. I know this is a long one this week, but an important one. Tobin, I think, or no, you
Yeah, I
actually
don't mind these being this long. The longer, the better. I appreciate all the knowledge, honestly.
Yeah, no problem. That's what we're here for.
Hey, Sketch, your question on
You
the
may not feel that.
it's you prepay for the carnet, so you don't pay at the border.
Okay, perfect. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good call. Tobin, so you had a question. He says, does Canada still charge taxes on merchandise? Yes.
Yes.
Sir. Yeah.
I have a quick question. What if you lose your carnet on the road?
Anyone want to take that? Do you get an email?
The good answer is you don't lose it. You kind of treat it like a passport. It's the passport for your gear.
Okay.
But if you do, then obviously, I mean, you just have a backup. I mean, you scan it and keep it on your computer, or keep it in your email. Depending on your team, I might have a copy. The team might have a copy. The stage manager might have a copy.
Management
that
might have
way,
a copy.
Management, what I'm saying? The business management has a copy. Your agent will have a copy. So I mean, it's you can get it. It's just the right answer. Just don't lose it.
It's going to look bad.
Yeah.
Right. And going back to losing things, if someone loses their passport like the night before you're going to Canada, like we've had that happen before. We're about to go into Canada that night, and someone's like, "Wait a minute, I can't find my passport." You just gotta leave them behind. That's like an immediate leave behind situation, because you can't let one person stop you guys from getting to Canada unless it's the artist.
In that case, would you? Probably a discretion question, but would you look to find a replacement, or look to see, after that show, if you can get that guy back to across the border?
Yeah, you usually just have them go to the next city, because typically you're not in Canada for more than one or two shows. So if you're just going to Toronto and coming back, then you would just have them go to the next city in the U.S. and meet them there. I mean, it's depending on the situation. But if they're replaceable for that night, then you don't want to have to fly somebody out. But if that could be a situation to run into, I suppose.
Word. Appreciate your job, per usual.
Yeah, no problem. What else do we got here? Connor, I don't know if we take your question yet about the airports?
No, I don't think so. But just as far as when they ask you to claim stuff or declare, kind of how do you handle that process?
Anybody want to take that for airports?
Just because we spoke about flying, when it comes to that, if you're flying with a lot of gear, you usually want to have some kind of course, you want to have a gear manifest with you at all times, regardless if you have a carnet or not, especially when it comes to flying. But usually, when you're flying, they typically will have a carnet office that you can go to. But if you're flying with that much gear that you need a carnet, you should most likely be freighting it, which the freight company will be handling. Because usually, you're flying with handhelds, you usually just need that gear manifest with you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot.
Sweet. Myra, feel free to unmute yourself. I saw you just had a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if the carnets are for all borders / if you're maybe driving down to Mexico or something, maybe not flying, or if it's specific to Canada.
Yes. Most countries, I mean, all countries wants to know what's bringing. All countries wants to know what people are bringing into their country. So it's every country wants to know. So
But it's
And
that
it
specific.
was like,
Sorry.
say that again.
But you'd be using that same specific form, like between any border.
Yeah, it's a list of what countries accept it, but most countries that you should go to. If they don't accept it, you probably shouldn't be doing the show there.
and Asia's a little even more specific about some of the stuff you bring in. Like they wanted to know every like laptop that was being carried and anything you had in your hand. Like when I went to Jamaica, it was a whole process. I think Cotton had some words for the people from Jamaica by the end of that little situation there. But it's definitely quite a process country to country, and it's about being like adapting, and it helps to have a production manager obviously to help with that.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Did we have any other questions in here? I think that was the last one. We're gonna wrap this one up. This has been a long one. Appreciate everybody. Next week we will be going over advancing a show and settlements. After that, we'll go over run of show and master tour stuff for 5. And session 6, we're going to go over security and just like what makes up a good tour manager personality wise traits.
I can't wait to next week.
Yes, sir. Awesome. Thank you guys. Appreciate you at all. And we will see you next week. We're going to take it easy.
Appreciate y'all per usual.